Maybe actually be a cover by number one, a sports station happy 98.9 FM. You may also say a happy sports. Now, I am on what say menya a year opinion of share rugby so a bemuha and a pay minino ebedi and kumo mukaya. Why yes, see you a master to go to Copain. Mr. Herbert Mensah and the guest on a year happy sports. In ebedi kumo, afa rugby home or Ghana ha a year be memu aha and a physical cry yashe. Kwa betu afa so ama awukansi a yedie ewo Ghana ha no afa ntuma pemfra ai kanka ye Black Stars yi die ne betimi aye ama enungwase a ebei etwetwa na ye football no abekra behwe. Mr. Herbert Mensah my guest. Good morning and welcome to Happy Sports. We here yes as a crime free the Springboks any Jumedia omudie ubeye president ye omu etimi eje the Rugby World Cup is woman and so obetimi ni ya share experiences a kwan fa so ji wani said ye wani fa so eje ye mra ye final whistle no koya na say omadi enkunim no a kwan be na fa so ji wani.
Morning my dear friend. Yes, very glad to be here, and I say good morning and of all of you all your the Springboks beating the All Blacks, it was something else. You know, I have been pitching for a very long time that Africa is one. I know we have our problems, but I had daily messages that I sent through to the Springboks. I reminded them that there are 1.4 billion of us, and a victory in a continent like Africa that is limited in investment, in opportunity, in playtime, in a continent where we recognize only one sport, football, without understanding that we have so much talent in other areas, that it was huge. It was huge. So to watch the match as I did, sitting amongst close friends, and I'm a great respecter of New Zealand rugby. I think that the All Blacks rugby over a period of time is the benchmark. But the South Africans have this will, and I like to believe it's an African will. I've seen it in Azuma Nelson, I've seen it in sprinters, I've seen it in UFC fighters, I've seen it in Ghana now with boxing. I've seen it in NBA, where Africans are excelling in NBA. That Africans, if you give them the right opportunity, they have something special. So I was hugely proud to be waving the African flag, wearing the Springbok tie. It was something that was really, really special indeed, and I think Africa needs to be proud. Don't forget, they were world champions in 2019, so to repeat the feat was something else. You know, but every World Cup, you have to take it, in every competition, like the AFCON, etc. You take it through the battles that take you there. And believe me, the Springboks had some battles against the islands of Tonga, which exhibited levels of physicality that were frightening to see. And that really was something else. Right the way through to their encounters with France, with England, right the way through to the All Blacks. They had a very difficult set, and in each level match, you saw levels of physicality, of injury, of having to come back, of short recovery time. That is the mark of a true gladiator, and I think that the Springboks made South Africa, made Africa proud, and for me as the president of Rugby Africa, it was a momentous occasion.
Mr. President, do you know if you say yes secret in TIA, Springboks, for instance, dominate rugby not just on the continent, but in the world?
The dominance of the Springboks, I think it sends out messages. If you take it that within Africa, the investment is incredibly small. If you look at as president of Rugby Africa, I have a budget of about $2.2 million for the whole continent, for major competitions, about 8 to 10 competitions. And rugby, don't forget, we're dealing with bigger squads, more people. We have medical issues. We therefore have got to do huge amounts in terms of training and education. Air flights across Africa, we pay for those. And yet it is that we make it manage. If we're able to do that, it sends out a message. And now we are now putting pressure to get more money into the sports. Can you imagine if we had money? When I look at AFCON in Ivory Coast and the winners get $7 million, that's nearly three times 3 years budget for the whole of a continent of which the world champions are from Africa. Even in football, the world champions are not from Africa. So it gives hope to those people who cannot be boxers or cannot be footballers. They can be rugby players. You can be 2 meters and 150 kilos, or you can be 1 meter 65 and 80 kilos. It's a sport that attracts people of all sizes, shapes, and it provides massive opportunity. For the Springboks to win it in 2019 and to repeat it again shows that really Africa has something special. All we need is the investment. Greater investment from governments, number one, greater investments from the World Rugby, greater investment from partners, from banking institutions, a change of mindset right across to understand that sports is such a big business. You see, if we change it, and from my days in Ghana running Kumasi Asante Kotoko, where we brought the innovative ideas, a lot of them at that time, because we understood that sport was big business. We received no money. There was no prize money for winning the league. There were no investments. We did not take loans from Menchia. There was no money from government. And therefore, we had to make it work in the best way possible. Sports is big business, and we really need to get around that if we're going to move forward and be able to achieve the global success that we have in rugby as the world champions.
Omo yadie no kre na omo be the gold standards on the continent, not just the continent but in the world. Die na betimi aye ama some other African countries edu level South Africa for edu in rugby. Any omaji World Cup no do na esi omo na so die na betimi aye na African countries ni be edu level South Africa for edu.
For more countries to reach that level, we need greater investment. Look at South America and then look at Asia Pacific. The South American countries, their governments have invested hugely. And we saw this last World Cup, Chile and Uruguay out-qualify America and Canada, knock them out in order to go to the World Cup. That investment came from their governments, the sense that not everybody can be the best at any one sport, although Chile and Uruguay, Argentina, who have also invested heavily in rugby, have also invested heavily in football. So you have cross-sport investment, and it's making the nation proud. That investment comes back. The countries are recognized for this beautiful thing that is called sport. Sport is big business and requires the investment. There are many countries in Africa who are developing rugby in country. Kenya, Zimbabwe, Uganda, and there are many others. But those are certainly at the top of the tree. Women's rugby in Madagascar, where a home game, normal game, they get 10 to 20,000 people watching a normal game of rugby, whether it's men or whether it's women in Madagascar. That's more than we get these days at a Ghanaian football match. That happens in Madagascar. The Cameroonian ladies, not to forget, obviously, the Kenyan and the rest. Can you imagine if we had the investment to do an under-20 competition, to do an under-18 competition? If it is that we had an AFCON-style structure that would allow every country to play at every level, then you would see that Africa would really be on the map. Not just with the Springboks, but right across the board. Because I do believe that the greatest athletes, most of them emanate from here in Africa.
But so say you bought them fifi na Ghana rugby so no e she na da kwan mu say de be ya ye agrofen rugby no etimi enyini etumpon e wo Ghana memu ha.
Ghana rugby, I left the scene in August. There are internal governance issues that are being resolved by through Rugby Africa. The conclusion of which is not in my hands, but certainly in my CJD, and the rest will make a determination.
Now, you can't sports development. Dear na what dream in Nimdia, what me aye was Sante Kotoko. Dear na what dream yen tia the development of the sports and the promotion of it, no, aye be hui.
Sport is big business, and at a time where, if you take rugby apart from the kind one-off donation from His Excellency the President, Ghana Rugby in 8-9 years has received nothing from the Ministry of Youth and Sports, and I think 2 payments on one occasion, on 2 different occasions, from the Olympic Committee, and nothing from the NSA. So you need somebody who will come to the helm and can raise private capital, private interest, divert money via sponsorship or other means. But as you know, those don't come because you are playing the game. They come because of who you are. It is not like football that is on every television station. It is not like football that you can fill stadiums in every single region of the country. That's not how it works. So raising money is incredibly difficult. You've got daily training, you've got support, you've got medicals. If people rupture cruciate ligaments, as you know, that could be a $10,000 plus bill at a time. Even at matches, you have to have ambulances, and there are statutory things that we at Rugby Africa and World Rugby insist must be at matches. Doctors have to be trained to a medical level in case of injury. It is a high-intensive game with huge levels of investment. And therefore, that becomes the determination of what happens in the future. At least when I was president of Ghana Rugby, we achieved huge milestones. The women rose to as high as number 7 in the whole of Africa. The men were within the top 10 of Africa. That's incredible for a non-rugby playing nation. We were members of Rugby Africa, but not members of World Rugby. We became members of World Rugby in my tenure. And the greatest achievements were probably beating Algeria, who are 3rd ranked in a Rugby Africa tournament in Kampala. The Ghana Eagles beat Algeria in a historic match. So you can see the potential is there if the sponsorship is there and the opportunity is there, but that is no longer in my hands.
Mpacho eba o kan sie e wo Ghana ha waye bida wasante kotoko ugusu ye rugby on the continent. Dey na wadwene mu eba no development and promotion of sport yenye ni enti ama yedru bia yedru.
I think the structures are wrong with sports. If it is, you have things not going right, what happens? We ask for change, a shuffling of the pack. When I was involved in Ghana football, I used to write about it. You cannot simply remove the head and then the rest of the rotten tree is still in place, shuffling to different positions. You need something that is so revolutionary and dynamic. And if you do that, then you will then come to the beauty that is of our athletes. If it is that you do not have people who understand that age grade development from youth upwards is the source of the future, you do not have a fruit tree where the fruit are automatically ripe. They go through stages. And we have just taken some things for granted based on past history that Ghana is great. It doesn't matter the sport. Of course, one will look at football given the monumental, disastrous performances at the cyclical World Cup and 2 AFCON competitions, almost as though we do not learn. So until it is that you actually get the right people who understand the need for that change, people who understand that sport is big business, and perhaps they do not go to government every single time, they need funding, and others in sports who do need government funding are in a position to receive it from structures with transparency and accountability. And then it is that we build stronger institutions right the way through. If we don't do that, we have little hope. Ghana is going backwards by the day. I travel a lot and I speak to many ministers of sport on a weekly basis. And there's so much. When I sit down with the Minister of Sport in Morocco and see the grassroots program for development, how it is all engineered back into education, the huge amounts of money they're investing, it's not surprising that they reached the semi-final of the World Cup. To underperform in Ivory Coast, I was not surprised. I predicted before that all the North African teams would suffer, because in running Kotoko, I knew if you played Wydad or El Ali or Zamalek or any of them in their countries or in the northern zone, you were in trouble. When they come near the equator with high humidity and the temperature, the conditions, very few have ever succeeded. So if you look at that, that should not be the yardstick to judge Algeria, Morocco, and the rest. Of course, they must improve in these conditions. But across the board, the way that they operate, you can see the investment that they have in hand is such that they are getting excellence in their results. So we really need to change from there. It's no point we have another monumental failure, and we have 2 more major competitions coming this year, and we will probably have the same kind of results again. Without the right kind of investment, there's a problem. I remember a few years ago when I was being questioned as to why I said it took us 4 to 6 months to prepare for a major tournament. Because as a sportsman, and I'm a sportsman when I was young, I played sports even at an international level in the case of rugby. The preparation is huge. It's not about what you do with the ball. It's often what you do without the ball. Your core strength, fitness training, your nutrition, the mental preparation before match practice, getting the mind right is something that takes quite a period. Unless you have very strong domestic leagues, strong, I don't mean what we have in Ghana, very strong domestic leagues, then you can tie the two. You see it if it's in the world of rugby, in countries like New Zealand, you see it in countries like South Africa, where the school system, the private school system, invests heavily into the sports, infrastructure, games, curriculum, application, opportunity, is such that they will produce future heroes, as we have seen in that country. And therefore, it's not about a sports bill. It's not about another bit of legislation. It's about people who really do understand it and understand that bottom line. And if they do, then it is that everything will click. Because the good Lord has provided us with exceptional athletes. So to be underperforming in the way that we do is a travesty.
Baby Edri, when you say a new law and a Edri, baby around the and your crowd a football imu na a young one say your national team ko 2 AFCONs. Nina no your film group stages. The last time you win in an AFCON game 2019 in 10 games you win back up. Are you surprised?
I think I've dealt with the issue of football. I think it's quite clear. You really need to deal with it completely differently. And unless you're prepared to do that, it changes. You know, a few years ago when they were having the GFA elections, I stated that I believed that whoever became the president or whatever we call it of the institution should be somebody who would eventually be able to raise private capital. Because football must be the easiest sport to raise money on. You have a captive audience. If you can clean it up and get the imagery right, then money follows. Because money doesn't like noise and money doesn't like dirtiness. If you can get that right and they have the connectivity, they should be able to. Then when you go into tournaments and you disgrace yourselves, as we have done from Brazil right the way through to present, then it is that you realize that it is money you have raised. It's like it's your own investment, your own funding. It is not automatic that government should just step in there, throw it in. At the end of the day, you then pay yourself winning bonuses, huge amounts of money, and things that are quite frankly obscene to a general public that is struggling to live and to cope. And yet without the general public, you have no football. So there's a level of disrespect that is become institutionalized. And unless that is removed, you will continue getting the mediocrity you get until eventually you'll find that even now you lose to Comoros, you lose to Cape Verde, you struggle with everybody. So it's only a matter of time where you just 3-4 times you do not qualify for anything of any significance. And then maybe it is eventually people get tired of this and things will change. But why should it reach that point? It needs to be something completely different to take us to the point where success is success is success is success. Don't compare ourselves to the past. I mean, of course, we do not have the Michael Essians and the likes back in our team. Go back further, the Abedi Peles and all of the other superstars whose names I've not mentioned in this brief. We've had super great players, and we don't have the same today. But we could see that things were beginning to go wrong a long time ago. And now we've hit lows that we did not think were possible.
You share the local league. Na o manage kotuko in levels or kotuko do ye. Efe no say one of the steps on betimi aye ɛma yɛdum pɛmpɛ so yɛbɛkɔ akɔduro ɛyɛ sɛ yɛbɛte league no ɛfiri no wayɛ no autonomous wadwene mu no wofi sɛ no ɛnɛ the magic pill a yɛfa a yɛhaw nyina no bɛtwa ɛwɔ yɛ local league mu anaa.
Making the league autonomous, that's nothing new. We've seen it in other leagues. And I remember with the late Jones Abu Al-Hassan, it was something that we campaigned for a long time, but nobody wanted to let go, where it is that you make it a more professional setup and get the people who are sitting on the musical chairs of changing positions, the so-called experts who are not experts, taking us into the quagmire and abyss of nonsense that we're in. And it starts maybe with changing within. I think we lost the opportunity when we were meant to restructure Ghana football. That was a bold move by the president, but the people clearly involved in the process did not take advantage to take us to where we're meant to go. And I think that is a very serious issue indeed. And I think that is truly sad. I think that is truly sad.
President Mensah Nkomo de intimi ni ayeni asante kotoko ho enkomo. I very important say yebedi sa nkomo yi. Mpacho na ene yi interim management committee a womo ene etutu kotoko niema edima womo asante kotoko yi omo ye one step forward a no my 3 steps backwards. Die ne betimi ayi omotimi ayi a and as a structure benefits ideal for the club to run. Is it the board management structure or say fruity shares my investors be more now? What do you think should be the way forward for the club in terms of the structures of the club?
It'll live on beyond everybody else. I choose not to comment. I only choose to extend my love, my blessings. When you leave something, you've got to take a step back because the way you look at it is not the way the next person looks at it. And you just have to respect the process and hope that it can rise again. Many great teams are no longer great. And a few, with the changing times, we saw the transition from TP Mazembe to what has happened in South Africa with Sundowns. We've seen the re-emergence of Wydad and others. And then we've seen other great teams now no longer be great. There was a time where Hearts and Kotoko dominated Africa. And I think unless it is that we look at the change in the terrain of what brings greatness, both domestically and across the continent, Kotoko and Hearts and the rest are not going to get back.
But already, and before Sabe Bosumbi Daho, a penny be about 3 years. Now, power struggle, no Ashas. You face the same thing. Just this last management also face the same thing. The NT office after every 3 years, there is this power struggle in the club, and the number to me, I'm sad, no, about form.
The internal problems of Kotoko and the internal problems of other teams, I will leave that to His Royal Highness Otumfuo to manage and decide on what happens with those. I think that we all have our views and ideas, but my respect is too high to engage in that publicly. I think there needs to be a change. What was good in an olden day situation cannot continue today. But maybe they are mirrors of what we're talking about in terms of the national teams, where they need to be in a position to have people who raise money, are more accountable, understand the cost and value of money, and investing in accordingly, and therefore run it more as a business without the assumption of rights. Because I always say that Real Madrid without supporters is not Real Madrid. The same with any of the big teams, Bayern, Inter, Juventus, Man United, all of them across the board have to support and respect the supporters. It's only by respecting the supporters that they can claim to be really great.